Halston 112. I'm doing a lot of old school fragrances, aren't I? I've done a few already the last week or two, and I think I'm just going to continue to do some old school fragrances. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to do Z14 here in the next week, and I'm probably going to do Bogart Pour Homme here pretty soon. Maybe tomorrow I'll do this. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of old school fragrances lately, and it seems like the more that I wear my old school fragrances, the more I'm in love with my old school fragrances. This is called Halston 112. This is the brother of Halston Z14. As a matter of fact, I got a few fun facts for y'all. In 1976, Halston come up with, they created Halston 112 and Halston Z14. And they couldn't make up their mind which one they wanted to launch. So they decided to launch both of them exactly at the same time in 1976. A lot of people are curious about the names, Halston 112 and Halston Z14. They're actually not, they're technically not the name of the fragrance. They're perfumer's code or fragrance codes that they used, which consist of letters and or numbers. It was a code that a perfumer used to identify a specific fragrance that he was working on. It's a code. So instead of naming these two fragrances, they just kept the names as the codes, 112 and Z14. Another fun fact, most of these Halston bottles have an indentation here, and a lot of people don't know what that is from. This is called a pinch bottle. All Halston bottles that look like this are called pinch bottles. It's because back in the 70s, they were trying to come up with a new design for their bottles. So they were working with these soft molds, making different shapes out of these molds to try to come up with a new design for their bottles. And they accidentally, one guy accidentally just like put his thumb here and his index finger here, and they looked at it and they actually liked that little indentation that the guy used with his thumb and index finger. So they actually kept the bottle design like that. It was actually a mistake, but they used that, and it's called a pinch bottle. I like this fragrance. Like I said, the more I've been wearing my old school fragrances lately, the more I love them. And this is actually one, it's not my favorite old school fragrance from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but it's one of my favorites. I also love Z14 a lot too. I'll tell you what the first half of this fragrance is to me. This is, of course, it is old school, which I love my old school fragrances because I think back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, I think especially men's fragrances, but female perfumes also, they had so much more character and personality back then than they do now. And you could tell nothing was unisex back then. Everything, I mean, you had men's fragrances. This was one of the standard men's fragrances back in the mid 70s and late 70s. There were men's fragrances and there were women's perfumes. And all of them had so much more character and personality back then than they do now. Everything now is, there's so much of everything is unisex. When a house comes out with a fragrance that sells really well, all the other houses copy that. So you have like so many fragrances that smell the same. But back then, everything was like so much different. I mean, you could spray something back then, and you could tell exactly what it was. You could tell it was Z14 or 112 or Drakkar Noir. But everything's just like sort of bland now. Not everything, but everything is so unisex and there's not a lot of fragrances now, unless you go to niche or independent houses. There's not a lot of fragrances that have a really great personality, a really strong personality. Not like, you know, this has really good character and really good personality. But I'll tell you what I get from the first half of this fragrance. It's very strong, really strong, very masculine, very classic smelling, very old school smelling, which I love. It's very spicy. It's like cardamom and pepper. A really strong green accord, and it's coming from galbanum. Galbanum gives this a really deep, dark, rich green smell. And there's a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of herbs, and it's coming from basil. It's minimal sweetness, but the sweetness that you do get is coming from basil. The second half of the fragrance, you still get a little bit of the spices and a little bit of the basil and a little bit of the green, but in the dry down in the second half of the fragrance, it's a little bit more about resins and amber. You get really good amber and really good resins. Of course, you get oak moss and musk, but it's not really strong. It's a little bit softer and a little bit more pleasing to me in the second half of the fragrance than the first half, because the first half is it's a little bit in your face. It is a little bit strong and a little bit too much, but it's still really nice. But I actually like the second half of the fragrance a little bit better because it's got a great amber. And also the second half does have minimal sweetness too, but it's coming from jasmine. It's got a really good jasmine in the dry down. But this, I looked online last night. I was curious to see how much this was, and it's like 15 bucks for 100 mils. So if you're interested in something like this, I'll put a link in the description on where you can get it. I think Gift Express has it for like 10 or 15 bucks, and so does Fragrance Net. But I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in this. And I love it, man. I do. I've wore this the last couple of days, and I love this. I might actually wear it again tonight. But anyway, I love you guys, and tell me what your favorite old school fragrance is. If you have any fragrances from like the 60s, 70s, or 80s, put it down in a comment what your favorite. Actually, tell me what a couple of your favorites are. Anyway, I love you guys, and I will talk to you later. Peace.